Thank you for joining us this evening. I'll now introduce the leader of the Workers' Party of Britain, George Galloway.
I feel like the Scottish television personality, Ricky Fulton, one of whose characters was the Reverend I.M. Jolly, who would say at midnight on New Year's Eve, in the most lugubrious way possible, "A Happy New Year, I suppose." I say that because whilst it's incumbent on me as the leader of the Workers' Party of Britain in our first broadcast of 2021 to wish everyone a Happy New Year, which I sincerely and earnestly do, it's also my duty to honestly appraise the political juncture at which we stand. As I speak to you, literally right at this minute, a mob has taken control of the Citadel in the United States Capitol building. They are on the Speaker's dais. They are declaring Donald Trump slogans and demanding that Donald Trump be regarded as the lawful president of the Republic. The mob outside looks rather like the Maidan in the Ukraine, or any of the color revolutions that the United States has sponsored and organized and tooled in various ways over the years, decades, scores of years, in fact. And it's impossible to know right at this moment how this evening in Washington, D.C. will end. A gigantic crowd of Trump supporters seems to have taken control of the streets around the Capitol and now the Capitol building itself. The Vice President of the United States, Mike Pence, has had to be evacuated from the building for his personal safety. Now, of course, the likelihood is that order will be restored, but at what cost? The United States remains a country divided on a knife edge. The results in Georgia last night, I've just been looking at them. Yes, they provided the Democrats, it would appear, with 2 new senators in a staunchly Republican state, largely due to a fall in turnout in staunchly Republican areas, which is probably connected to the whole Trump affair, one way or another. But those 2 victories were won by the most extraordinarily narrow margins. In one case, 0.4 of 1%, in one case, less than 0.6, 0.5, 0.7% of the vote. So, of course, familiar claims of vote rigging and double counting and all the rest have already emerged. This on top of the highly disputed US presidential election just a few weeks ago. And so the division in the most powerful country in the world is now not just on a knife edge, but may this evening, God forbid, involve knives or maybe guns. As I pointed out some months ago, if Trump had won the election, the liberals and the progressives would be out on the streets in their pussy hats. But if Joe Biden won the election in contentious circumstances, the Trump supporters would be out on the streets with their guns. And that may be tonight or tomorrow or sometime soon, the fate of the United States. Now, why do I dwell on this in this New Year broadcast? Well, because the terrifying possibility exists that in the last days, literally days of Donald Trump's presidency, that he will let loose the dogs of war and cry havoc. Yesterday, President Xi of China placed the armed forces of China on maximum alert, told them that they must be ready for war at any second. They must be ready to fight at any second. This because of the possibility of some reckless provocation, some reckless attack on either China or Chinese interests in the world could provoke an armed conflict between China and the United States. It's much more likely that the current brouhaha over a South Korean tanker found to be deliberately despoiling the waters of the Persian Gulf in an undoubtedly American organized provocation when the tanker was taken into custody at Bandar Abbas in Iran. South Korea, that mighty military power, dispatched military assets to the region. The United States reminded everyone that South Korea and the United States have a joint responsibility by treaty to defend each other should either come under attack. You may think I am being alarmist, but the Iranians don't think so. And they have also, just like President Xi Jinping of China, made it clear that they are ready to respond fully in the event of an attack on them or on their interests by the United States of America. And of course, in London, in our own capital city today, we were reminded of the still dangerous and overweening power of the United States over our own lives. The victory of Tuesday in the courts when Julian Assange's extradition hearing was brought to a conclusion with a judicial decision to refuse extradition, that victory, the sweet taste of that victory, quickly turned to ashes in our mouths when the United States opposed bail in the High Court today, and they were successful in denying Julian Assange the pleasure, the happiness, the warmth of being reunited with his family. This is a significant turning point, as indeed was the judgment that the Judge Barrister made in the Julian Assange case. And I'm going to take a few minutes to discuss that, because I myself, and I could show you my scars, have been at the front line of the defense of Julian Assange from the very beginning of the persecution of the greatest publisher, the greatest journalist of our age, the founder and leader of WikiLeaks, which did so much to reveal to the world the crimes being committed by our rulers, not just American rulers either, but by the rulers of the world who like to operate in the dark, under cover of darkness, under cover of secrecy. And Julian Assange ripped away that darkness, ripped away that secrecy, and performed a signal service to humanity, which will never be forgotten, which will be enshrined in history long after Judge Barrister is a name long forgotten. But the actual situation, the legal situation, is that Julian Assange is a free man. He was held in Belmarsh prison only pending an extradition request from the United States, which has been rejected. And in the words of the court document issued by Judge Barrister, when giving her verdict, the prisoner is discharged. So if he's discharged, why is he on this bitter January night still behind bars in Belmarsh prison, with its swirling coronavirus crisis, cutting down staff and inmates alike, where there's no proper heating, and where Julian Assange, always an unconvicted prisoner, now a prisoner who's been discharged by the courts, still doesn't have his winter clothing, which as an unconvicted prisoner he was entitled to, has been entitled to since the weather grew cold, his clothes remain in the basement of Belmarsh Prison. All because of decisions made not in London, not in a court in London, but decisions made in Washington by the Justice Department, the Injustice Department of the United States of America. And if that is not a sign of vassalage, I really don't know what would be. The judge wanted to discharge, free Julian Assange, but she could only dare do so on the flimsiest of all the grounds that the case was fought upon. The judge found for the United States on all of the material issues involved in the indictment that has been served upon him. In so doing, she signaled that the freedom of the press, the freedom of investigative journalism, the freedom from extradition on political charges has all been formally ripped up by the British judicial system. The only basis on which she refused extradition was on the grounds of Julian Assange's health and the likelihood that he would commit suicide, and that the prison system could not stop that suicide in the gulag, in the Guantanamo Bay, internal Guantanamo Bay of the maximum security prison in Colorado, to which he would have been sent and undoubtedly would have remained for the rest of his natural life. This makes us a vassal of the United States in the year that we were supposed to be taking back control. Now, as everyone watching this, I hope, knows, I, as the leader of the Workers' Party, and the Workers' Party itself, since its foundation just 1 year ago, have been in the vanguard of those fighting for Britain to take back control. The difference between us and others like Boris Johnson or Michael Gove or Nigel Farage is that we demand Britain should take back control, not just from the European Union, which has been achieved, but from the United States of America, or any other state for that matter. Because the Workers' Party truly believes in a united, sovereign, and democratic Britain, free of all encumbrances, free of all bullying, free of all vassalage of the United States, the European Union, or anyone else. We stand for a truly independent Britain, able to reach its own conclusions on foreign policy, on economic policy, on domestic policy, environmental policy, anything that we like, anything that we vote for, anything that we choose, that we decide on, we must be free to implement and must be in thrall to no one. And that is one of the things that distinguishes the Workers' Party of Britain. We believe in a united Britain, that is to say, one that is not broken up by secessionist or separatist forces, against which we stand, by the way, not just in Britain, but elsewhere in the world too. In my relatively short life, I have opposed the partition of many, many countries, from Vietnam through the Congo, through Ireland, through many other places. I oppose the partition of countries. I oppose the breakup of countries. I oppose the breakup of the USSR, of Yugoslavia, of Czechoslovakia. So I'm certainly not going to support it in my own country. So a united country, a sovereign country, as I said, free to take its own decisions, to make its own arrangements in the world, to trade with whomsoever we like and on whatever basis we can agree with them without anyone else telling us what to do. And a democratic Britain. Now, democracy isn't just putting an X on a ballot paper in the occasional referenda or the regular election cycle, although that's part of democracy, and we fully participate in all of these things. I've just submitted to our leadership, to my comrades in the leadership of the party, a long list of local government by-elections coming up in May, for example, throughout England and Wales. Some of them really quite tempting targets for us. We like elections, we like referenda, we fight them. But that is not the be-all and end-all of democracy, not least because we have an electoral system which is very far from being wholly or entirely democratic. We will fight these elections whilst maintaining a position of demanding full democracy in Britain. And that means democracy over the workplace, democracy over the economy. We cannot stand by whilst the plutocracy in Britain hands out billions of pounds worth of contracts of public money, not only to their friends, that was bad enough, but today we learned that a British government minister has just given a bumper contract to members of his own family. This we cannot countenance. In China, on the same day, the biggest banker in China has been sentenced to death for the corrupt receipt of more than $200 million worth of bribes and other inducements. China does not stand for corruption. I don't myself believe in the death penalty, but that's China's affair. But you see the point I'm making. We have handed out not 208 million pounds in dodgy money to dodgy companies, mates, cronies, family members, but scores of billions of pounds over the course of just 1 year, 2020, and now into 21 in the coronavirus crisis. I don't have time to adumbrate all of these examples. In any case, they are found peerlessly adumbrated by my comrade, Dr. Ranjit Brar, in our regular Sunday night broadcasts on the mother of all talk shows, all of which are available on the internet, on YouTube, and so on. But suffice to say, for the moment, that not only has the British government and the Scottish government, for that matter, handled the coronavirus in a catastrophically bad way, they have, in so doing, enriched people who were incapable of delivering these services and goods for which they have been paid very substantial sums of public money. And we will not rest on this question, even when the coronavirus crisis has abated. We will continue to demand that those responsible for the grand larceny and the even grander incompetence in the way Britain has handled the coronavirus crisis should face not a public inquiry, they should face trial for corruption, trial for negligence, trial for corporate manslaughter. And that's not going to go away even when the coronavirus goes away, if indeed it ever does. We stand now on this day, a day in which 1,043 of our fellow citizens died from the coronavirus, and 61,000 new cases were recorded. So bad has been our government's handling of this crisis, and the government in Holyrood, in Edinburgh too, that we have written our name in infamy as a country. We have demonstrated everything that one shouldn't do in the face of a pandemic about which we were warned, not just warned by China within a week or two of them identifying the nature of this coronavirus 19, but warned by our own wargaming of what would happen in Britain if a coronavirus hit our country. And that war game took place 3 years ago. We never heard anything about its conclusions, because its conclusions were that the British Health Service would collapse and that we would be plunged into a crisis the likes of which we have not known for a century or more. That war game and its conclusions turned out to be right, but Britain took no steps to prepare itself for such a pandemic. Far from it. We took every step that we could take that would make us more incapable of dealing with such a pandemic. Every privatization, every subcontraction, every maneuver that we could make to make the health service weaker and to enrich the private sector, the friends and cronies of the Conservative Party. That's what we did. And when China warned us last January that a pandemic was headed our way, or a coronavirus epidemic, which would become a pandemic, was heading our way, even when in Italy the bells were tolling for unprecedented numbers of dead people, we still had weeks in which we could have taken decisive steps. But steps we did not take. Indeed, Boris Johnson was literally cavorting on tropical beaches when he should have been chairing the COBRA committees, the emergency committee that would or should have been taking decisive action. We locked down far too late. We locked down far too unsubstantially. We locked down in a Mickey Mouse patchwork series of twists and turns, veering this way and that. We locked down too late. We lifted the lockdown too early. We spent billions of pounds telling everyone to eat out, to help out, thus fueling another wave of this deadly pandemic. We took the best part of a year to get basic masks and other PPE to our frontline workers in the health service and in other public services. We gave contracts to people who had never bought a mask in their puff. We gave them millions and they failed to deliver. We spent £22 billion on the test and trace system, which has disappeared without trace. 22 billion on a test and trace system which has almost utterly failed. This has been a very considerable disaster for our people. Not only are the best part of 100,000 people dead as a result in a year, 100,000 dead in a year. Not only are many people now sick for the long term with the long COVID, the results of which we cannot yet predict, but the British economy has suffered devastating blows. Mass unemployment in 2021 may very well take us to levels of unemployment not seen since the Great Depression of the 1930s. Indeed, such a situation already exists in the United States of America. The workers are being asked to pay the price for a crisis not of their making and for failures of our government rather than our public. The workers are being fired, then rehired on inferior contracts. Companies are taking big money from the state and then making workers redundant. The retail sector, the hospitality sector, the aviation sector have all been devastated, and no one knows what shape, if any, they will come back in. The workers of British Gas are having to embark on a 5-day strike to protect the rights, the terms and conditions of the workforce there. And there have been many other strikes that have begun now to break out in Britain. The Workers' Party stands with the workers. We do what it says on the tin, but we demand that the state must intervene as the last resort. Such decisions as the closure of industries, such decisions as the making unemployed of millions are too important to be left to the private sector. They must be the responsibility of the state, a state which, after all, has taken back control. Just quickly, the Workers' Party is just 1 year old. We have more than 4,000 members, organized in more than 70 branches, literally from Penzance all the way to Perth in Scotland. This coming year, we will do everything that we can, commensurate with our strength, which we will strain to the utmost, to stand by the people, to stand by the working people in particular in this country. We ask you to join us. We ask you to follow us on Twitter, on Facebook, to join us and to support our financial appeal, which will fund organizing resources in all of the regions of Great Britain, from the southwest coast to the northeast coast of Scotland. I do wish you a happy new year. On a personal level, I hope that that can be true. I myself, in the dreadful year that we've just had, nonetheless experienced the wonderful happiness of a new baby and indeed a relocation back from London to Scotland. I hope in your personal lives you have a happy 2021. But on the public level, we ask you to get involved with us in fighting for a better Britain as we move forward into 2021. Thank you for watching the Workers' Party of Britain New Year broadcast.